Hi all, and welcome to my YouTube channel. My name is Ben, aka Notions, and today I thought I'd make a different type of video, an overclocking video, and using some of my overclocking and computer hardware knowledge and teaching you how to overclock an AMD Athlon XP Tbred B processor. And this does not apply to the Palomino processor, well, core processor, or the Tbred A, because the Palomino was a totally different type of architecture in how the processor was built and designed, and the Tbred A was a poor clocking processor, and the Tbred B 1700 plus, 2100 plus, and 2500 plus, the latter being the Barton Core, and the Barton Core ran with 166 MHz frontside bus, whereas the Athlon XP core ran with the 133.34 MHz frontside bus. So take the XP 1700 Tbred B for example. It ran with a multiplier of 11 and a frontside bus of 133.34 MHz. So if you multiply 11 by the 133.34, you'll get something like 1446 MHz, or between 1446 and 1460 MHz. You should find the core speed of the CPU running at. And that's basically how you work out the core speed of any processor, the multiplier multiplied by the front side bus, the FSB. And the Barton Core ran with 166 MHz front side bus, and also the later Barton Core processors ran with a 200 MHz front side bus, so 200 MHz, sorry. So the Athlon XP 3200, which is the last in the line of the Barton Core XP socket A CPUs, ran with 200 MHz frontside bus multiplied by 11, and this CPU is basically the same as the 2500 plus Barton Core that ran at 11 times 166, and about 1800 MHz, the core speed of the 2500 plus Barton, and the XP 1700 could be overclocked to the same speeds as the XP 3200 plus, just by raising the frontside bus to 200 from 133.34. Simple as that. Even if you have a poor clocking 1700 plus Tbred B, which would be quite a rare thing, you might have to raise the voltage a little bit, but I think the default voltage was something like 1.5 volt for the 1700 plus DLT3C, but the D U T3C was a 1.6 volt vCore default processor, so slightly different. But and the D U T3C Tbred Athlons Tbred B, of course, they were worse clocking than the DLT3C Tbred B processors due to the higher vCore, the default CPU voltage that they came standard at. But you could change the default multiplier, default voltage, etc. by cutting and joining bridges using a knife and a HB pencil. Very easy. I re-enabled, I should say, the level 2 cache on a AMD Athlon Tbird 1600 MHz processor just by rejoining a level 2 cache bridge with a HB pencil, and it's changed the level 2 cache from 64 kilobyte to 256 kilobyte, and you'll find that the Athlon XP CPUs that at the time were more expensive than the Athlon Tbird, they had a 256 KB level 2 cache, while the Tbred Athlons and other Athlons made before that had a 64 KB level 2 cache. So quite a lot of difference there, and re-enabling the level 2 cache made a lot of difference to distributed computing projects such as SETI at home, folding at home, Berkeley Open Infrastructure of Network Computing, and other applications as likewise. And overclocking newer CPUs is a bit different, but the Athlon 64 has a HTT hypertransport HT link, hypertransport link. The HTT is basically the same thing as the FSB in the Athlon XP and Barton Core CPUs, and you just up the HDT link. The multiplier of the HDT link is the same thing as the FSB. You just up that to change the core speed of the processor, and leave the multiplier alone on the Athlon Ryzen 5 CPUs, and just change the HDT link. And you'll probably find you'll have to up the default vCore voltage for the CPU a little bit to achieve a bigger overclock. I had an Athlon 64-3500 plus Venice socket 939 processor overclocked to 3280 MHz on air cooling, which was a world record on air cooling, as the default speed for the 3500 plus Venice was just 2200 MHz, and default voltage for the CPU I think was 1.35 volt, and I had it up to 1.8 volts, which is incredibly stupid and very dangerous to the CPU. But I only did it 4 or 5 times, just test the maximum post power on self-test. The CPU would allow the motherboard and other components obviously to do, so that the system speaker would only beep 1 time, meaning that the power on self-test was passed, and therefore the screen would come on, and it would be basically, it would mean that the RAM and motherboard and processor, etc., graphics card too, were working properly. If you have any questions about overclocking Athlon XPs, Tbred Bs mainly, but I did have an XP 1600, a vCore Palomino CPU. If I overclocked to 1800 MHz from 1400 MHz default, it was 10.5 times 133.34 to get the roughly 1400 MHz core speed of the processor. Just up to make the front side bus a little bit really, and up the voltage to like 2.1 volt, which is very high voltage. But I think the Palomino core went at 1.75 volt or 1.85 volt default vCore, I can't remember now. But thanks for watching this video. Speak to you all soon. Cheers. Have a nice day. Bye all.